Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are live here with Sophie Webb from HeadCount, sorry, and we'll be talking a little bit more about what they're doing to save the vote as election day comes up tomorrow, and their efforts to protect voters in the US. Sophie, before we get started here, do you want to just introduce yourself quickly and tell us a little bit more about you and HeadCount and what you all do?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sophie Webb, and I'm the Event and Partnerships Manager at HeadCount. So I work on a lot of our large scale events, such as music festivals, where we're always out registering people to vote and encouraging civic participation. And I also work on our brand and corporate partnerships side of things, where, a lot of times companies want to support a nonprofit or some sort of initiative that they believe in. So we get a lot of that, especially in election years. So, yeah.
Of course, yeah. Well, why can you tell me a little bit more about like what you all do with the music industry and why that is your particular focus when it comes to this work?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just give you like in a nutshell, HeadCount. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit organization, and we register people to vote at concerts, music festivals, and cultural events. Um, Obviously, during the pandemic, we stepped away from the events, but we've been back doing a bunch of festivals and getting started on tours again.
Hmm.
And we find that like the music scene and going to where people already are for things like voter registration and political engagement is really effective because there's a pretty significant barrier to entry around politics and like understanding what's going on. So we find that when we bring it to people where they're already in a fun space, where they're already in a good mood, where it's easy, um, we can kind of change the associations that people have with voter registration or civic participation. And it's also just way easier to take 2 minutes to register to vote when you're, waiting for the show to start than like try to go to the DMV or even like know which link to find online. So, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I love the idea of, being able to meet people where they are and make it easy for them. It's so similar to some of the work that we do and just makes civic participation such a breeze to get involved with. And so, speaking of this and like making campaigns easy for people to join on, what did Headcount have to do for this specific campaign to sort of make it more approachable to people? Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so the campaign we're doing, we always do a secondary digital campaign usually, so that
Hmm.
whenever we're out at events or online, people can either register, or if they register, they can still engage with us. So this year, our campaign is called Save the Vote. And basically, it is a campaign centered around protecting voter rights and ensuring that people have access to fair and free elections. Over the pandemic, we saw the highest voter turnout in 120 years and the highest youth voter turnout ever. And a lot of that was due to expanded access to early voting and mail in voting, things that really help people vote without an issue. But unfortunately, since then, there's been over 400 bills across 39 states introduced that would restrict voting access. And so this campaign is our response to that. And our campaign is focused on the local level. So the states actually hold like a lot of power when it comes to deciding on how people can vote and how easy or challenging it is going to be. So our campaign is a Contact Your Lawmakers campaign, and we make it really easy for anybody from any state who comes up to us at a show or finds us online to send an email to their governor and 5 of their local representatives, basically asking them what they're doing to protect voting rights and encouraging them to protect voting rights and saying that they care about this as a member of their jurisdiction.
Exactly. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like people have been really excited to learn more about this campaign as you approach them, both digitally and in person?
Yeah, I've been out in the field a lot this year at festivals, and it's been a really fun campaign to work on because you'll get a lot of people coming up to you saying like, "Thank you so much for doing this. Like, this is so important." Like, people are really excited to take the action, not just to like check off a box or like maybe get a little giveaway we're doing, but because they actually care and think it's important. I feel like voting and elections were so top of mind last year, and people got a little
Mhm.
bit burnt out. Um, but since we've seen sort of the fallout from, all the expansion of voting access, I think people are paying more attention, and that sort of lasted into this year after the presidential election. So I'd say it's been getting a really positive response. And it's a cool campaign because most of the other, um, you know, voter protection campaigns that other organizations are doing are painted as very partisan or focused on the federal level and federal legislation. And ours is unique in the sense that it focuses on your local representatives, the people who represent you most directly.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm sure by reaching people, at concerts or festivals that are adjacent to where they live, it's a lot easier to sort of get them involved and pull them in that way as well.
Yes, definitely. And it's a local election year. So
It
that's
is.
another big thing for us. We want people to vote not just for president, not just for the midterms, but for all of the local positions that actually have a greater impact, on your day to day life, usually.
Exactly, exactly. I'm in Virginia and we've got a pretty big local election coming up soon, with some like pretty important things on the ballot for where I live specifically. So it really, really is so important to get involved when you can. And so, do you want to share anything more about the Save the Vote campaign? Can you give us a little more background on why this campaign?
Yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned, 2020 had 67% of eligible Americans voted in the 2020 election,
Hmm.
which I mentioned was the highest in 120 years and the highest youth voter turnout ever since people 18 got the right to vote. And 70% of people that voted in this past election voted early or voted by mail. And those were the two biggest expansions that were made to voting during the pandemic, because obviously all the concerns about gathering in person and being in spaces
Hmm.
physically, many states, 28 states changed their policies to allow for more time to vote early, to allow for, not having to provide an excuse to vote by absentee, by adding more absentee ballot drop boxes, to the different counties. So our Save the Vote campaign is a response to the hundreds of proposed bills and laws that have come after that are aiming
Hmm.
to roll back voting rights, including a lot of the measures that were implemented during the pandemic that actually helped people to vote.
So, really just focusing on how things got expanded during the pandemic and the ease in which people were able to vote and making sure that those rights are protected across the nation for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was so exciting last year to see, the amazing turnout numbers. And we don't want to see like a backslide or any sort of fallout for that because we believe that this is a nonpartisan issue, and that our democracy works best when people do participate and can
Hmm.
participate as easily as possible.
Exactly, exactly. You want as many people to be able to have a say in how things go in their localities as easily as possible because when there are these barriers, it makes it so much more difficult for people to even be interested in getting involved.
Yes, definitely. And like I mentioned about the local elections, this might be anybody who's doing this action with us by emailing their local reps at, festivals or online. This might be the first time they've ever really done anything involving their local politics. And a lot of times you're more likely to get like an email back or a response from your representative because they're not representing half your state, they're representing like your town and your district.
Hmm.
So I think that's exciting for people too to actually see that it's not like an empty void and that the offices tally how many people reach out. A lot of offices send responses, and just sort of like reminding people that they work for us, they represent us. And so hearing directly from us, the voters, is super important.
Exactly. And as a reminder, I'll pop it in the comments again, but the link to email your representatives through HeadCount is in the comments. Be sure to follow that action because it really, really is so, so important, as Sophie was saying. Well, Sophie, to move on here a little bit, I know you touched on a little bit the impact of COVID-19 and your response to it. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more for us? I know the amount of voters has increased, but just anything else that
Yeah,
you've noticed for
definitely.
that.
just in general, like outside of
Yeah.
the campaign. Yeah, 2020 was crazy because before the pandemic hit, like field events is really the bread and butter of our organization. We have 40,000 volunteers in our network all across the country, hundreds of team leaders who are organizing our efforts in, any given metropolitan area, any given night of the week at a concert or, a community event. So it was a big change when COVID happened and that completely disappeared. And for a while, it was a big adjustment. We didn't know what we were going to do, but it ended up actually being our most successful year. We registered over 400,000 voters through digital and online tactics. We worked with artists who got behind us and were offering prizes for not for registering to vote because that's illegal, but we had a tool where you could check your voter registration. And so anybody that checked their voter registration through the Camila Cabello page was entered to win like a video chat with her. And we did this with festivals where a lot of festivals were giving away tickets to next year's, or at this point, a lot of them 2022's festival. So it was really fun to like be creative and see our organization flourish in the digital setting, which we've always had a presence in, but we've never honestly had the time to like fully dive in. And so the removal of like the entire event piece, I think really gave us the opportunity to expand our digital presence and just sort of explore like how we can make it work for us. And people were home and online, so that helped as well.
Oh, I'm sure having so many people who are sort of a little more tuned into their computers help being able to draw them in. Okay, well, thanks for sharing about this campaign. Do you want to share a little bit more with the audience the ways in which they can get involved? I know we've mentioned, contacting our representatives. Is there anything else you can do?
Yeah, so the link that you dropped in the chat is actually a link to the Save the Vote hub on our website. And it has the action you can take. And there's also an interactive map that you can click on your state or any state you want. And we actually use data to rank 1 to 50 how hard or easy it is to vote in your given state. So like the easiest state to vote in is Oregon. So they rank number 1. The most challenging state to vote in, just based on the laws and the restrictions, is Texas. So they rank 50. And so every state has a place. And it's really interesting to select your state or select the state you went to school in, or, where your grandparents live or whoever, and just kind of learn in a really like digestible way what's going on in your state. And it's interesting because like I'm from New Hampshire originally, and I never had any issue voting, but New Hampshire is ranked 45th, which is pretty bad, So it was eye-opening to me to see that, my experience doesn't necessarily match up with the overall experience. So that's sort of a cool interactive piece. And then we also used data from HIT Strategies. They did like a data collection to find out what issues are most important to Gen Z and millennial voters this year and moving forward. And so as part of the Save the Vote campaign, we connected these issues to voting. So like, how does voting and voter access impact LGBTQ plus rights? How does it impact racism and discrimination? How does it impact criminal justice? And how does it impact jobs and the economy? Those were 4 of the most important issues to young voters. So also on our webpage, there's links that sort of explain how voting and civic participation connect to things that people are very passionate about at this time. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. It's fun to explore. There's a little YouTube video, and definitely email your lawmakers. And I mean, beyond that, like look up your polling place, make sure you know where to go to vote tomorrow. Lots of states have local elections happening tomorrow. And then if you're interested, we're always looking for volunteers and stuff too. You can find that on our website. So there's sort of a lot of different ways to get involved with HeadCount.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for laying all of that out for us. If you're just joining us, we are live with Sophie Webb from HeadCount. We're talking a lot about HeadCount's use of music in terms of reaching voters and what they're doing to save the vote to protect voter rights that are under attack across the country. there are 2 actions you can take. In the comments, you can email your local representatives and you can find your polling place. Sophie just explained how HeadCount has made it really, really easy to sort of look these things up and get in contact with your representative through their website. So we would 100% recommend checking that out once we're done wrapping up here with Sophie. So Sophie, can you just explain to me a little bit more about like why this issue is important and who this attack on voting rights affects disproportionately, or who it might like negatively impact more than others?
Yeah, sort of a two-part answer. Like I was mentioning before, there's a lot of, I think, discontent and distrust and sort of apathy towards civic participation right now, which is completely understandable based on, lots of different people's experiences with the system. So part of the campaign, like we've been talking about, is just to provide a positive experience for civic engagement and to like bring it back to the basics and like remind people and remind our representatives that we elect them, and
Exactly.
is a right in this country, not a privilege. And it should be that way practically as well. Everybody should be able to vote easily in this country. And yeah, unfortunately, most of the laws and the bills being proposed, they disproportionately affect young people. More young people voted by mail in 2020 than they did than in the entire 2016 election. So just people voting by mail, young people, was more than the number of young people that voted in 2016, which is, a pretty telling number. So we know that providing early voting and absentee voting helps young people vote. These measures help people with disabilities vote if they can't physically go to the polls, if they don't have somebody, to drop off their ballot for them. Voters who don't have disposable income or don't have the time off from work, who can't afford childcare, to go stand in line for 5 hours to wait and vote. Like that's just not like a reality for a lot of voters in this country. And also people of color, different minorities. These laws, unfortunately, often take aim at communities of color that are also supported by the expansion of voting access. So really almost everybody, we all benefit from it because we all benefit when people participate in our democracy.
Exactly. And we have our Unlocked Voices campaign ourselves, which is working to amplify the voices of formerly incarcerated women to really tell their story. And a lot of what we hear from them is that voting rights, even after, they've served their time and have been released, are an issue for them. And,
Yeah.
people who have been incarcerated who come out and can't even vote for who represents their children in their school board. It's so, so important. And, even little things you think really
Yeah,
make a
for
difference.
sure. We get a lot of that in the field when we're at events. A lot of people will say, "Are you registered to vote?" And a lot of folks will respond, "Oh, I can't. I'm a felon," or like, "I've been convicted of a felony." And the laws are so different and nuanced in every state that a lot of people just don't know that they actually got their right to vote back after they were released or after they're finished probation or parole. Their voting right is restored, and these laws are like always changing too. So it's another example of the barrier to entry. Like there's no easy like way that this information is shared, and a lot of people think like if they've been convicted of any sort of crime that they can never vote again, and like that's not the reality. So that's a really good example because we definitely do work around that as well.
Exactly. And we love seeing anyone who's advocating for those voices and making sure that their rights to vote are restored, because it really is so important. Regardless of whether or not you've committed a crime, regardless of anything that's happened, your right to vote is exactly that. It's your right to vote.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
100%.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Sophie. We're going to wrap up here with one last question for you. And really just want to know, if there's anything else, if there were one thing you could share with our audience before we left tonight, what would that be and why?
Okay. I think the one thing would be check your polling place for tomorrow. And by doing that, you'll learn if there is an election in your county, which there probably is. And once you do that, take like 20 minutes to just like read who your local representatives are, read what's on the ballot, like research, anything that you have a question about. A lot of times there's like referendum votes and stuff about specific issues. I know for me, sometimes I sit down, open my computer, and like go to do something like that, and I just feel like so overwhelming and I don't even know where to start. But if you really just take like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you'll learn a lot if you just dig like a little bit. And a good place to start for that is checking to see if you have an election tomorrow and finding out where your polling place is and making your plan to go vote tomorrow.
Amazing. Yes. And that is all so, so important. You can find your polling place again on HeadCount's website. It's linked in the comments here. Please, 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 if you are able to vote, make a plan to vote for tomorrow. And you can keep an eye on HeadCount for more on the Save the Vote campaign and what you can do to get involved. Sophie, thank you so, so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Please make sure you have a plan to vote tomorrow.